Hi, my name is Rich Mona. I've been coming to the church for about 13 years. Um, we came up here and saw how wonderful the church was, and we decided to stay. A number of years ago, I was in Saratoga in the backyard of someone's house. And as I walked in the backyard, I noticed this young man sitting by himself. So I figured, well, I'll go over and I'll sit with him and we can chat. So I sat down and I started to talk to him. And we talked in things in general. And then he started to tell me his life story, which I thought was kind of unusual. But he told me that he was from Connecticut. His dad was a professor at a college in Connecticut. Unfortunately, he said he didn't get along with his father. He had difficulties. His father was always on him about everything. And so he ultimately drifted away from the family and started to get into alcohol. And then he got into drugs. And he got cleaned up a little bit, and he decided, well, I'm going to head north, and he came to Albany. And he met this woman, and they got married, and he and her had a family. And they lived around in the Capital District area. And he was telling me that he felt it so difficult because the lure of drugs was so hard in his life, and sometimes he would just have to get by himself. He really needed to do something, but he wasn't sure what. And he kept talking, and all of a sudden, as I'm sitting there, the Holy Spirit says to me, tell him about Jesus. Tell him about Jesus. And so I started to do that, and I realized that this man kept talking, and I just couldn't get a word in at all. And he kept going on, telling me more about his life story. And it was kind of heart-wrenching because it was kind of sad that this young man, a lot of potential, very smart, was just wasting his time. And as I started to say something, his wife walked over. And he said, do you remember we're supposed to go away and we have to get going now? We have to pack and we have to leave. And so I didn't know what to say, but he stood up. He said, goodbye, Rich. It was good to meet you. So I stood up, shook his hand, and I realized to myself that the moment was lost, that somehow he didn't hear about Jesus. Well, what happened is I hadn't seen him in a while, and a friend told me that this man took his life and committed suicide. And it just shocked me because I realized that I could have said something and maybe changed his life. So I decided that never again will I let an opportunity go by where I can speak to somebody, even if it means to be bold and tell them, wait a minute, let's talk about something. Let's talk about Jesus. So that's what I always will remember, that there's somebody out there that needs a touch from God.
Hi, I'm Linda Tucker. I grow a large vegetable garden over on Dix Avenue. I used to just grow a garden. Now I grow a garden of love with my family, friends, and the help of God. My father was a married man, and he literally hopped the fence and met up with my mom, who was a widow at the time. And being a single mom, she had to work long hours and struggled and wasn't home much. And I spent most of my childhood with my Aunt Sally and my Grandma Willard. And they were the ones that taught me unconditional love. They taught me the security of a hug and how much it felt to be safe wrapped in their arms. Now, my mother was very faithful. She read her Bible every night. but she didn't have a whole lot of time, so that was her private time. But I know that she was religious. I knew she counted on God. I knew she prayed to God. But that was the extent of what I knew growing up. When I was about 13, my Aunt Sally passed away. And I remember laying in bed in tears before the phone even rang, because I knew my happiness had gone. And I was alone. I didn't know what I was going to do. I didn't know where I was going to go from there. I was a teenager. I experimented with drugs. I didn't know what to do at that point. I just moved forward. And the only way I could was to close off that part of my life just to survive. I did have happiness in my life, don't get me wrong. I got married. My ex-husband wasn't ready for marriage. He had somewhat of a temper, but he needed time to grow. And we were better off apart. We split when my son was 9 months old. And my mother is the one that helped me raise my son. My son was the greatest gift God could have given me. Me and my mother became very, very close. When I gave birth to my son, it was on a Wednesday. My father died with cancer the following Monday. So my son was a gift to both me and my mother. He filled in so many things. And he brought us so close. In 2003, my mom had ALS. She passed away, but I remember that last week, she couldn't read her Bible because she was pretty much comatose, but she was home. So I read the Bible to her every night because that's what she always did. I don't remember what I read really, but she had this book with daily readings, and you just went in and did the daily readings. And it was just out of respect and honor for her that we did it. And I remember on June 5th, was exhausted, and my body reached its point of limits, and I have epilepsy, so when I reached that point, I have a seizure. I never got to read to her that night. I remember waking up on the 6th, that Friday morning. It was like 5:30 in the morning. And I went in and I read Thursday night story to her. And then I said, well, it's Friday, so we'll read Fridays. So I read Fridays, and then I got to Saturdays. And Saturdays was something about leaving and being at peace. And I said, no, we're not going there. I'm done. And then I stopped. And I took her hand. And it was almost like, I can look back at this stuff now. It was like God was talking to me then. Because at that point, I took her hand. I just told her I didn't know how we were going to do it. But at some point, somehow, Jason and I would get by. If she needed to go, be at peace, go, and we would be okay. It was a matter of minutes and she was gone. Jason graduated high school and he went on to college. Jason's my pride and joy. I love my son with all my heart. But by 2013, he'd been at college for almost a year now, and I was all alone. Nobody needed me. I had no purpose. I had no real meaning in life. My happiness was gone. I gave up. I reached a point where I was just done. Finances were horrible, and I just didn't want to do it anymore. So I attempted to end my life. And I found out that my boss apparently cared about me because when I no-showed and no-called, something I'd never done before, he sent the sheriff's office to my house. And they found me. I spent a day and a half in ICU, not knowing whether they didn't know whether I was going to come out of it or not, but I did. And then my friend Sue, which was she's been my friend for over 15 years, came to me and said, "Come to church with me." And at that time, I wasn't ready. And so I just politely said, "No, thank you." She was one of the few people that knew what had completely gone on. But afterwards, I had trouble breathing. I had chest pains. And the doctors blamed it on what I'd done. I blamed it on what I'd done. By January, the problems were still going on. Then we found blood clots in one of my legs. And that was on a Monday. On Tuesday morning, I got up to take care of my animals. All of a sudden, the whole room was going black. I was out for over an hour. When I came to, I somehow got myself focused. I called the doctors, I called my aunts. I ended up in the hospital. And the doctors and the nurses at the hospital don't know how I woke up, because they discovered that I had multiple large blood clots in both of my lungs, and the right side of my heart had become enlarged. And they later discovered that the blood clots were there way back when I had decided to end my life. So the fact that I woke up way back then was a miracle in and of itself. And then to do it again, my son kind of laughs and he just says, "Mom, you just keep waking up." At that point, I said, God must want me awake for something. I don't know what, but again, my friend Sue says, "Linda, come to church with me." And I looked at her and I said, "I'll try anything once." And I came to church. And Sue was my first guiding light that led me to the Gospel Lighthouse Church. And then Sue introduced me to my cousin. Now, I'd met my cousin before, once, but it was in passing. And when I met her at church that day, it was like looking in my aunt's eyes. I could feel the love. I could feel that energy that my cousin puts off. From that point on, my cousin became my guiding light. I was so weak, and my body was weak. I was having seizures. And my cousin would just show up out of nowhere. And she would tell me that she just was guided there. And I'd be like, "You can leave now." And she wouldn't leave, which killed me, because that's just who she is. And she would tell me all about what God did for her and what he could do for me. And then I met her husband, this really quiet guy who, at the time, claimed he didn't talk much. They pulled me in. They showed me love. They made me feel wanted. They brought back that happiness that I had lost. They opened that trap door that I had closed for so long. And I honestly think that it was God that brought my cousin back to me, because there's a connection there that I can't find anywhere else. She has shown me so many things and opened so many doors. In 2014, my mother's birthday, I went to the cemetery, and I brought with me the option of ending my life or the option of saying, "I'm done with this." I went there and I started talking to God for the first time. And I had told him that I was done. I didn't know what I was going to do really, but I was going to trust my cousin, and I was going to trust him. And I was going to move forward from that point. And when my life ended was going to be his choice, not mine. Of course, let's be real, it was his choice all along, but however, my cousin, she thought she had failed. She thought that I was ending my life, and she had no way of knowing I was turning to God. She called the police on me. I was taken out of the cemetery with the police cars. I didn't know how to explain to her that what she was seeing as a failure was not a failure at all. She had led me right to where she needed to take me to. She was that guiding light. She held that flashlight all along. With Pastor Bill's help, we sat for hours at her house one evening, and she finally saw, and I know she became comfortable. At this point, we are so close. We share a lot. And I would be lost without her. Went from an empty house to a very full house, and an empty heart to a very full heart. When you hit your darkest moments, turn to God, because usually He'll give you somebody with a light to lead you back out of the darkness. And I thank God He gave me my cousin.